I've never been a compassionate man. Not really. In my world, kindness was a distraction, empathy was a liability, and success meant stepping over anyone who stood in the way. My father used to say, "Nice guys don't close deals." I believed him, and I became the man he wanted, cold, sharp, untouchable. I lived in a high-rise penthouse overlooking Central Park. My suits were custom, my calendar fully booked, and my reputation spotless. But that morning, everything cracked. It was a rainy Tuesday in Manhattan. I had an important meeting near Wall Street, but my son Lucas had to come with me. His school was closed for a power issue, and the nanny had called in sick. He was in the back seat, humming softly to himself, clutching his toy dinosaur like it was sacred. I was scrolling through emails on my phone, annoyed by traffic, annoyed by the weather, annoyed by everything. That's when it happened. The SUV stopped at a red light on 5th Avenue near 42nd Street, and out of nowhere she appeared. A woman, soaked, hair tangled, clothes clinging to her like wet paper. She stepped in front of my windshield with a squeegee in one hand and a bucket in the other. I was ready to yell, to roll down the window and tell her to back off. But then Lucas lowered his window before I could stop him. "Mom, are you cold?" That moment froze in time. Suddenly, a horn blared. Tires screeched. A cab lost control behind us, sliding on the wet pavement heading straight toward our vehicle. I turned, too late to do anything. My breath caught. And then I saw her. That same woman threw herself against our SUV and shoved Lucas's door with everything she had. The cab clipped the rear, scraped the side, and finally skidded to a stop. People screamed. Someone shouted. A cyclist dropped his coffee. But the woman, she was still there, kneeling, soaked, shaking. I got out of the car, heart pounding. Lucas was safe, shaken but untouched. She looked up at me. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold. But her eyes, those eyes were fierce, not afraid, not grateful, fierce, like she was challenging me just by breathing. I opened my mouth to speak, to thank her, maybe even apologize, but she stood slowly, turned away, and walked back into the crowd like she'd never been there at all. And I stood there in my $1,000 suit, soaked with rain and adrenaline, asking myself a question I couldn't shake. Who was she? And why did it feel like she hadn't just saved my son, but saved me too? I couldn't get her out of my head. Days passed, and yet that moment, her soaked silhouette, her fierce stare, the sound of the squeegee tapping the glass, kept playing on loop in my mind. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not my board, not my therapist, not even Rosa, my housekeeper, who basically raised me and Lucas. But Lucas, he talked about her every day. "Dad, do you think the lady has a coat? Maybe we can give her one of mine. Does she have a little boy too?" I didn't know what to say. And to be honest, I didn't want to feel what I was feeling. That woman came from a world I spent decades avoiding. And yet, that same woman saved my child when no one else moved. Rosa noticed something was off. "You're quieter than usual," she said one morning over breakfast. "I'm fine. You keep looking at the window like it's going to give you answers." I said nothing. She folded her arms. "When someone poor saves someone rich, no one asks her name. They just say thank you and walk away." That hit harder than I expected, so I made a decision. A strange one I wouldn't have made a week before. I used my resources, money, contacts, connections, to try and find her, not to reward her. Not even to thank her. I just needed to see her again. After 3 days, one of my assistants, Jeremy, came into my office with a printed report. Slim. Only 2 pages. Her name was Grace Evans. Age, 32. No permanent address. Last known location, an encampment under the Williamsburg Bridge. One dependent, Emily Evans, age 6. I stared at that name. Emily. It was my grandmother's name. The only person who ever truly loved me before my life became cold boardrooms and iron ambition. That night, I walked into Lucas's room and just stood there watching him sleep with his stuffed dinosaur. His little hand was curled over his chest like a heart-shaped fist. I realized I had everything, and I was still empty. The next morning, I drove myself. No security, no driver, just me in a hoodie, on a mission that didn't make sense, not to anyone but me. I found her, under the bridge, surrounded by makeshift tents, burned-out barrels, and old mattresses. Grace was brushing Emily's hair with a broken comb. They were both laughing, really laughing. She looked up and saw me standing there. Didn't flinch, didn't smile. Just looked, calm, unmoved, like she was waiting to see if I'd run again. "I came to thank you," I said. She didn't answer, just kept brushing Emily's hair. "For saving my son." Nothing. I took a breath. "I'd like to take you both to dinner." She finally looked at me. Really looked. "Dinner?" "Yes, with me. Lucas would love to see you again." She stood slowly, picked up a small backpack, tightened her grip on Emily's hand. "Only if she eats first." That was all. No demands, no praise. Just a condition from a woman who had nothing, but moved like she owned her dignity. And I felt like the guest in my own world. I never thought I'd bring someone like Grace into my home, not because she didn't deserve it, but because I wasn't ready for what it would say about me. Rosa raised an eyebrow when I told her, "You invited her here to eat?" "Yes." She stared for a moment, then turned back to the sink. "Then I'll make dinner, and I'll make it good." That was Rosa's way of showing approval, grudging, quiet, but real. They arrived just after 7 p.m. I had sent a car, but Grace insisted they walk part of the way. Said Emily liked seeing the dogs behind the fences. They stepped into the foyer slowly. Emily wore a mismatched outfit, leggings with stars, a pink jacket 2 sizes too big, and a sparkly backpack missing a strap. Grace had washed her hair and pulled it into a simple braid. Her shirt was clean but faded, her jeans torn at the knee. She clutched Emily's hand like she was holding the whole world. Lucas ran toward them. "Emily!" They hugged like old friends, like nothing had happened in between, and that already made it worth it. Grace looked around, unsure. I offered her a chair at the table. She sat down carefully, like touching the furniture might break it. Rosa served pasta with grilled chicken. Emily's eyes widened. She whispered to her mom, "Do we eat this with a spoon or fork?" Grace looked at the silverware like it was a trick question. "We'll figure it out," she said. They started eating slowly. Emily first, devouring the food with tiny bites and wide eyes. Grace ate more slowly, carefully, as if memorizing every flavor. The room was quiet, except for the soft clinking of cutlery and Lucas whispering stories about school. Then it happened. Grace reached for her water glass and accidentally bumped the salt shaker. It tipped, hit the table, knocked over a ceramic candle holder. The crash echoed through the room. She froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't mean to." Rosa gasped softly from the kitchen. I stood up. "It's okay." She looked at me, expecting a lecture. Maybe worse. But I walked over, knelt beside her, picked up the pieces carefully, then looked up and said, "We're all more fragile than we look." She blinked, just once, then exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. After dinner, we sat on the back patio. Emily and Lucas played with flashlights, chasing shadows on the brick wall. Grace touched the edge of the armrest like she wasn't sure if it was real. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I haven't felt this kind of quiet in a long time." "What kind of quiet?" "The kind that doesn't hurt." That hit me deeper than anything had in years. In that moment, watching her watch her daughter laugh, I realized something terrifying. I didn't invite her out of guilt. I invited her because I wanted her to stay. The idea came to me at 3 a.m. while staring at the ceiling. I didn't want to just help Grace. I wanted her around, near Emily, near Lucas, near me. And I knew exactly how. The next morning, I asked Rosa to call her. She handed me the phone halfway through slicing avocados. "She's on the line, don't say anything stupid." I laughed nervously, then took the call. "Grace, I have a question," I said. "Shoot." "How would you feel about working at my company?" Silence. "Doing what?" she finally asked. "Assisting me directly, scheduling, emails, calls, basic logistics." Another pause. "You know I've never worked in an office, right?" "I know. That's why I'll teach you." She hesitated again. "What about Emily? We have a kid's space at HQ. She'd be safe, comfortable, and close." She took a deep breath. "Okay, but only if I get to earn it." "You already did." Monday morning came fast. I picked out a professional outfit for her, modest, practical. Rosa steamed it. Grace looked unsure. But when she arrived at the office, every head turned, not in admiration, in judgment. Ryan, my business partner, was the first to approach me. "Who's the new intern?" he joked, sipping his overpriced espresso. "She's not an intern, she's my assistant." His smile vanished. "You're kidding." "No." "Michael, come on. We're trying to land multi-million-dollar clients and you're bringing in her?" I didn't answer, just looked him dead in the eye. "Watch her. You might learn something." The first few days were rough. Grace fumbled with email software, misplaced a couple of folders, confused extensions with file types. But she listened, learned, took notes, asked questions. And by the end of the first week, she wasn't just keeping up. She was organizing better than anyone else I'd hired in years. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to a client on speakerphone. Her tone, polite but firm. Her language, simple but clear. And the client? He said, "You're not like the others." I appreciate that. Neither did Ryan. I found a passive-aggressive note on Grace's desk the next morning. "Maybe let the professionals handle real business." She showed it to me, confused. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Ryan's just scared of anyone who has something he doesn't." "What's that?" "A soul." She smiled for the first time that day. That evening, Emily and Lucas ran around my office lobby playing tag. Grace watched them, her hand gently resting on the counter. I offered her a coffee. She sipped it carefully. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. I didn't lie. "Because I want to be better, and when I'm around you, I am." She didn't answer, but she didn't run away either. And that was enough. Things were going too well, and I should have known better. Grace was adapting. Emily was thriving. Even Ryan had quieted down, at least on the surface. But snakes don't hiss until they're ready to bite. One morning, Ryan walked into my office with a smug grin and a folder in hand. Thick manila marked confidential. I didn't even ask. He dropped it on my desk. "You might want to know who you're trusting your life with," he said, then turned around and walked out. I opened the folder. My hands went cold. Inside was a police report. 2015. Name, Grace Evans. Incident, theft of electronic appliances. Place, Brooklyn, NY. Outcome, no charges filed. Case closed. It was flimsy, circumstantial. Her name was on it, yes, but nothing was ever proven. Still, just seeing her name on a police document rattled me. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the report for hours. It didn't feel right. None of it did. So the next morning, I went straight to her desk. She was filing invoices, focused, calm. "Grace, can we talk?" She saw the folder in my hand and froze. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "Ryan gave it to me." She looked away, took a breath, and nodded. "I used to work in a small appliance store, minimum wage, bad hours. The manager, he kept asking me out. I said no." She paused, her voice dropped. "One day, a few tablets went missing. No cameras, no proof, but I was the only one there. He blamed me, fired me on the spot, tried to get me arrested." I stayed silent, let her speak. "They couldn't prove anything, but it didn't matter. No one would hire me after that. I stopped putting my real name on resumes. I gave up." She looked me in the eyes, firm, not pleading, not begging, just tired of running. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want your pity, or worse, your doubt." I stared at the folder, then at her, and I made a decision. I walked straight into Ryan's office, dropped the folder on his desk. She already told me everything. He leaned back, smirking. So? Doesn't change the fact she has a record. No, but it changes the fact that you do now. His face twitched. I'm removing you from all HR decisions, effective immediately. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. One more stunt like this and you're done. That night I brought dinner to Grace's apartment. Simple, burgers, fries, sodas. Emily and Lucas played in the living room while we sat by the window. She picked at her fries, quiet. You didn't have to defend me. I wanted to. Why? Because I've been powerful for a long time, but I've never used it for the right reasons. Until now. She looked up. Something in her softened. And in that stillness, in that small New York apartment with ketchup stains on the napkins and kids laughing in the background, I realized I didn't just admire her anymore. I loved her. The gala was supposed to be routine. Same people, same suits, same champagne in overpriced flutes. It was a fundraiser hosted by the Hope Foundation, one of the most exclusive charity events in Manhattan. I'd been attending for years, but this time, I wasn't going alone. Grace hesitated when I asked her to come. I'm not made for places like that, she said. Yes, you are, I told her. They just don't know it yet. Rosa helped her find a dress, simple, black, elegant. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun. Emily stayed home with Rosa and Lucas, playing board games and eating popcorn. When Grace stepped out of the elevator in my building, I forgot how to speak. She was stunning. But more than that, she was present, calm, centered. We arrived at the hotel ballroom. Golden chandeliers, velvet carpet, cameras flashing, eyes everywhere. And then Vanessa appeared. My ex, perfect posture, diamond earrings, champagne smile. She walked over with her glass held high like a weapon. Michael, always on time and always full of surprises. Her eyes flicked to Grace. And who might this be? Grace, I said. She's with me. Vanessa didn't even pretend to be polite. Oh, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. How charitable of you. Grace stayed quiet, strong. She doesn't talk much, does she? Vanessa continued. Or maybe she just knows when she's out of place. Several heads turned. The band kept playing, but the tension sucked the warmth out of the room. Grace shifted her weight. I saw it, that flicker of doubt. I should have spoken right then. But I froze, and then Vanessa delivered the final blow. If you're going to pretend to be part of this world, at least learn how to walk in heels. A few people chuckled under their breath. Others looked away, embarrassed, and I snapped. I stepped forward, took Grace's hand, and turned to face the room. Everyone, listen. The music stopped. This woman saved my son's life. She's the reason I'm still standing here, and she's done more with a bucket and a squeegee than most of you have done with your trust funds. The silence was nuclear. Vanessa's face drained of color. She turned on her heel and walked away, heels clicking like gunshots on marble. Grace looked at me, shocked, and then she smiled. Not out of victory, out of something deeper. Peace. That night, back in the car, neither of us spoke at first. Then she whispered, "Thank you." I reached over, took her hand. I should have said it sooner. She looked out the window at the city lights. I've never had someone stand up for me like that. You'll never have to wonder again. And in that moment, surrounded by skyscrapers and silence, I knew I didn't just want her in my world. I wanted to build a world where she belonged. The morning after the gala, I woke up, happy. Lucas was giggling downstairs with Emily. The sun was pouring into the penthouse like a silent celebration, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Grace was still asleep, I thought. She'd spent the night in the guest room with Emily, just to avoid the late-night paparazzi buzz. I made coffee, toasted some bagels, even set the table. But then, Rosa walked in with a strange expression. "She's gone," she said. "What do you mean?" "I checked the room. She's not there. Neither is Emily. The beds were made. No bags, no sign." I ran to the room. Empty, like no one had been there at all. And on the bed, folded neatly, was a piece of paper and a plastic ID badge. I recognized the logo immediately. It was from a political campaign. Worn, faded, cracked plastic. Name, Thomas Miller. Position, campaign manager. Year, 2010. I grabbed the note, heart racing. The handwriting was clean, sharp. I'm sorry for leaving without saying goodbye. I never meant to be part of your story. I just wanted to make sure Emily had one. This badge belonged to my father. You'll understand soon enough. Please don't come looking. G. I sank onto the edge of the bed. My hands trembled. Lucas walked in, holding a drawing Emily had made. Is she coming back? He asked. I couldn't speak. I stared at the ID badge, the name, the date. Then a memory hit me like a wave. Thomas Miller. I knew that name. He was a whistleblower, a man who once tried to expose corruption tied to construction contracts across the East Coast, a scandal that disappeared from the media after only a few days, buried by people like my father. I called an old contact in Washington, someone who owed me a favor. What do you know about Thomas Miller? I asked. There was a long pause on the other end. Why are you asking about that name now? Just tell me. He was real, honest. He had dirt on some major names in infrastructure, including your father. Miller was set to testify, then he vanished. Heart attack, they said, but people close to him always thought it was something else. I looked down at the badge again, and then it all made sense. Grace wasn't just someone from the street. She was the daughter of the man my father helped destroy. And I was the son of the man who helped bury her life. I always knew my father was ruthless, but I never imagined how far he'd go to protect a deal. For years I had looked up to him, feared him. I'd built my empire following his code. Be cold, be smarter, be faster. Never flinch, never feel. But now, holding that old campaign badge in my hand, I saw everything differently. Thomas Miller wasn't just a name in an article. He was her father, a good man, a man who tried to do what was right and paid for it. And the worst part, my family helped make him disappear. I dove into research like a man possessed. Every name Thomas had linked to the corruption ring, my father had been in business with most of them, one of the shell companies involved in the missing funds. My father's signature was on the founding documents. Everything Grace had been running from and led back to me. No wonder she left. She hadn't been afraid of love. She'd been afraid of me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't sleep, couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I sat in my study, surrounded by paper trails, court files, redacted documents, and whisper-thin connections that painted one massive truth. My father helped silence Thomas Miller, and I had unknowingly welcomed that silence into my home. That night, Lucas knocked on my office door. He held a drawing Emily had made of the four of us, me, him, Grace, and Emily, all holding hands in front of our apartment building. He looked up at me. "Are we still a family?" I broke. I pulled him into my arms and I cried like a child. The next morning I made a choice. I contacted a journalist, one of the few left with integrity. I handed him everything, the documents, the evidence, the financial records. He looked at me, stunned. "This could destroy your family name." "I know. And your company." "I know." "And you?" "I don't care." He nodded. "I'll get the story out." Then I did something harder. I drove to the last known location Grace had stayed, the shelter where Rosa once helped place donations. No one had seen her. I tried the bridge, the subway stop, the food pantry. Still nothing. So I left a letter, not for Grace, for Emily. "Dear Emily, your mum is the bravest person I've ever met. I'm sorry for what my family did to yours. You didn't deserve that. But if someday you ever want to come home, we'll be waiting. Michael and Lucas." And then I waited, for days, weeks, and finally, one cold morning, Rosa knocked on my door with tears in her eyes. "She's back," she whispered. "She's downstairs." I ran, and there she was, standing in the lobby, holding Emily's hand, eyes tired, face calm, but alive. Still Grace. And when she saw me, she didn't run, she didn't speak. She just opened her arms, and I walked into them like a man finally forgiven. Grace didn't come back with demands. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't even ask about the letter. She just showed up, tired, quiet, holding Emily's hand like it was the only thing anchoring her to this world, and I knew better than to push. So I gave her space. Days passed. She slept. She healed. Emily and Lucas played like no time had passed at all. And me? I waited. Not with words, with presence. I brought tea, left blankets by her side, sat next to her in silence when the nightmares woke her at 3 a.m. I became something I had never been before. Still, reliable, safe. One evening, after Lucas and Emily had fallen asleep watching cartoons, Grace and I sat on the balcony, wrapped in sweaters. The city lights blinked beneath us. She stared at them for a long time before speaking. My dad believed the truth could change the world. I nodded. So did I, for a long time. I turned to her. It did. She smiled softly. You didn't owe us anything. I know. Then why are you still here? I didn't hesitate. Because now I owe myself to do it right. She looked away, blinking fast. I want to start something, she said. What do you mean? I want to build a place for people like me, like Emily, like my dad. A shelter, a resource center, a space where no one feels invisible. I exhaled slowly. You already have a name for it, don't you? She nodded. The Miller House. I smiled. I'm in, whatever you need. The next few weeks were a blur of movement. Architects, donors, paperwork, permits. Rosa became the head of the kitchen staff before we even had a kitchen. Don Pablo, an old friend of Grace's from her street days, showed up to volunteer as handyman and security guard. The building was old, worn, crumbling in parts, but it had a heartbeat. We painted walls with kids, planted flowers, set up reading rooms and bunk beds and a mural wall full of handprints. And slowly, life started coming back. To the building, to Grace, to me. One night after locking up, Grace and I stood in the empty common room. The lights were soft. The smell of fresh paint and warm bread hung in the air. She turned to me. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of being happy. I reached for her hand. Then let's be scared together. She looked at me, really looked, and kissed me, not with fire, but with truth. And in that kiss, I felt the city disappear, the past fall away, the noise go silent. We had been broken, but we were building something stronger, something new, together. The opening day of the Miller House felt like more than a milestone. It felt like a resurrection. The building stood tall, painted in soft blues and warm whites. The mural wall was complete, handprints of every kid who would ever walk through those doors. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted from the kitchen Rosa had built from scratch. The city's press came, not because I asked, because the story had spread like wildfire. The daughter of a silenced whistleblower opens a shelter in his name. It was everywhere. Grace stood at the front steps, holding Emily's hand. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, hair in a braid. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. The kids gathered, staff lined up. The band started playing soft acoustic music. And then Vanessa showed up. She looked different, less sharp, more real, holding a folder, her eyes glassy. Grace looked at her, calm. I don't want pity, Vanessa said quietly. I just need a job. Grace tilted her head. Do you know how to clean? Vanessa blinked. Bathrooms, dishes, anything. Grace didn't smile. She just nodded. You start tomorrow. Don Pablo burst out laughing from the side. That woman doesn't need revenge. She already won. The ceremony was short. Emily gave a tiny speech about how her new house had magic. Lucas handed Grace a bouquet of sunflowers. Someone brought homemade lemonade and cupcakes. Then, when the sun began to set, I pulled Grace aside. We stood in front of the same wall where she once spray-painted a single word during her street days: hope. I dropped to one knee. No crowd, no photographer, just us. "Grace Evans, will you marry me right here in the place you created from ashes?" She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She smiled and said, "Only if I get to keep my last name." We laughed. We kissed. The kids screamed. Rosa cried. Don Pablo dropped a plate. And that night, we danced barefoot under string lights. Me, her, the kids, the staff, the families. No tuxedos, no limos. Just real people with scars, stories, and hearts too big to break again. Grace leaned into me and whispered, "I don't need a castle. This was always enough." And in that moment, surrounded by the echoes of laughter, the hum of community, and the gentle squeeze of her hand, I realized something powerful. She didn't need to be saved. She saved me.